Good morning. My name is Lori, and I've had this channel for a while. If this is your first time tuning in, it's been a long time since I've been uploading, other than a couple of shorts yesterday. There's just been a lot going on, and I'm ready to talk, but I don't want to edit. So I thought, even though I've never really used this feature before, that I would go ahead and use it, and hopefully I'm being heard so that I don't have to redo this again. So, hi, how's everybody doing? And I realize that nobody's tuning in right now. That'll be later on, but that's okay. Let me know how you're doing in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. So 2023 has been a really interesting year. Earlier this year, I lost my little brother and was just kind of plugging along. After that all happened, decided just to take the Duck Dynasty dad's, word of advice, which is just not that I was going to forget about him or anything, but just forget about the past and just move forward and go ahead and plug along. So I was going along and doing really well, and I decided that I was going to lose some weight before the fall, and I started videoing about that, and then something major happened. And last month, around the 10th, 11th of August of 2023, my husband had a massive heart attack and almost died twice within a few days. And it was quite traumatic. As you can imagine, I'm a person that already has post-traumatic stress disorder, and so I held up for a few days, and then bam, it hit me so hard. I'd never had the panic attacks like that ever in my life, where I was literally trembling. And hi, I'm Lori, nice to have you here. Just sharing a story about what happened in the last month when my husband almost passed away from a massive heart attack twice. So anyway, yeah, I was having really serious panic attacks. So what happened is that we're building a little casita, or a guest house, and he was just under a lot of stress to get it done, and he was doing some the plaster on the drywall. I forgot what it's called, but the finishing coat on drywall, and that was when it happened. So he was hiding it from me. He was not plant-based. I've been plant-based for several years, 7 years, and I called myself a cheating fruitarian for a while. And then I went totally plant-based, doing the McDougall program, Chef AJ style. I took a lot of advice from Dr. Esselstyn. And so when this happened, from the moment he was in the hospital, he started asking for a vegan menu, and because he was refusing to eat any of the meat or anything that they were offering him that was animal products. And it was a pretty huge big deal. We're 54, so we're not that old. And it was really sad because I had tried to warn him that the way that he was eating would catch up to him someday, but I never in my wildest dreams imagined that it would catch up to him that quickly. And he'd spent the last 6 years eating a lot on the road, and as everybody knows, there's just a lot of oil that's in the restaurants. You can't find anything that's healthy for you practically. And I would always travel with him with my own food. I always was packing my own food, and I would show you, in videos or pictures of how I was doing that. So I was doing it, but I was also cheating sometimes, because I would have occasionally, I'd have nuts, or I'd put a little bit of cashew milk in my coffee. I was doing little things that I shouldn't have been doing. So anyway, when this happened, my husband's in the hospital. I couldn't eat, and basically I dropped 12 pounds right away. And I needed to lose the weight, but it was just really sad and traumatic. And I'll tell you, during that whole entire time, the one I had to depend on was the Lord. And I found myself using a cushion that's a floor cushion. We have tile floors, so it's really hard to kneel down, but I found a place to put that floor cushion and kneel and pray and intercede and ask God for help, because he is our only hope. he's the only reason that my husband survived, because the doctors told my husband that it was a miracle that he was alive, that most people would not have survived that massive of a heart attack. And what he had to go through was unbelievable, because first of all, when he got there and they said, well, you had a little heart attack, but they wanted to put stents in, and of course he said no. He knew that those weren't any good, and so he signed the waiver saying he did not want stents. And then he passed out because the blood wasn't getting up to his head, and I seriously think he almost died. But I cried out. I was right there, and I just cried out, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And he woke right back up, and he looked at our son, who was on the side of him, and said, what's the matter? And he said, well, Dad, you passed out. And he said, I just fell asleep for a second. He didn't really know what was going on. So because it was a life-threatening situation, because it was a massive heart attack, the doctors explained to us that if he didn't have the stents put in, that it could do more damage and make more, his heart die. And he was in a lot of pain. It was excruciating pain. So I asked my husband, I said, what do you want to do? He wanted to know what I wanted him to do. And I said, what do you want to do? I'm not going to make this decision. And he said he didn't want to be in the pain. So I said, well, then we're doing the stents. And all the plant-based doctors agree that if it's a life-threatening situation, do the stents, do the surgery to save their life. And so we made the right decision. However, we didn't know what kind of stents they were putting in. We weren't educated about any of that. Here in Mexico, there is a language barrier, and they do things differently. So we were basically at their mercy. Whatever they did, that was what we got. And so my husband went in, and he had just a local anesthesia on his wrist, and they went up and did the angiogram right up through his arm, and he basically had to have 8 balloons to clear it out, and then they put in 3 stents right into the widowaker, and it was clogged, and they told us it'd been that way this is a progressive thing that's been going on for a very, very long time. It wasn't just sudden. So he was hiding it from me for over a day. It started the day before, and so he didn't go to the doctor right away. But if he comes in here, I'm going to have to go off. But anyway, I'm just, maybe I could just leave it there since it's already almost 8 minutes long. Maybe I'll come back and tell you part 2. But anyway, I guess I can continue a little bit. He was released a few days later with prematurely. It was undetected and it's even in the medical records. I've gone back and read them. They said there was no edema, and he had edema really bad. And I knew he needed oxygen. I had researched that much that he needed oxygen, and they sent him home with no diuretic and no oxygen. So we were at home for just a few hours, and then it was lunchtime here in Mexico, so nothing was open to rent the oxygen tank. It was a horrible thing. But we finally got a machine here to him. It didn't work, and my Red Cross was here, and they didn't have any oxygen except for if we took him away on the gurney and put him in their truck. They didn't have any portable oxygen. It was insane. And he had just gotten out of the hospital and did not want to go back. But long story short, we had to take him back. He almost died in the car on the way to the hospital for a second time because he didn't have enough oxygen. But I had rented him an oxygen tank. By then I had a company come and deliver it. He told me the next day that it saved his life. So I am grateful, obviously, for that. And then the ER said he's worse than he was before he left, just hours earlier. And they told him in ER, and actually as he was going up to the intensive care again, that if he lived through the night, that he would be on oxygen, extra oxygen for the rest of his life. And I knew, everybody knew it when we didn't know if he was going to make it. And but by God's mercy, he gave us another miracle. It's like twice I had to, in my heart, say, God, I give him to you. So if I'm going to join the Widows Club, I was ready to take it on, even though I didn't want it. But that was just the place that I was. And that happened twice within a few days, and twice he gave him back to me. So I'm really grateful that he's still here. And about 10 days went a total in the hospital. He came home, he was on oxygen, but he was only on oxygen just a few days. It was pretty amazing. They had told us in the hospital he'd never lay down again, and he lays flat. There's so many things they told us. It was just like an up and down roller coaster. And in fact, when he left the hospital, was finally discharged, the doctor told him that he had an aneurysm on his heart, which happens sometimes after a heart attack, and that when he was stronger, he'd have to have part of his heart removed and patched. And he didn't tell me, my husband didn't tell me about that until 2 days later. So in between those 2 days, he was at home with me, because I had spent 2 nights in the hospital with him, and it was like impossible to sleep in there. It was so uncomfortable, and it was noisy, and there was so many interruptions, and they kept putting salt in his food, and I kept getting after them. And that's another kind of cool thing, because I went after the nutritionist, and after my husband had asked on his own for a vegan menu, I went in there to educate the nutritionist, and I gave him a copy of Dr. McDougall's color book in Spanish so that they could read it and kind of know where I was coming from. And then I was like after him, like, you're not giving him enough greens, you're not giving him enough, non-starchy vegetables, or, sorry, hang on a second, let me turn off my oven. And I was telling them that you have got to give him more starch, he doesn't have enough starch, and it was quite a fiasco trying to work with the hospital to give him the right food. And they were putting salt, and he was bloated, and I was just like, hello. So it wasn't until the last night they finally got in trouble in the kitchen there about giving him salted food. But I think the beans had salt, but they just kind of like didn't give him the juice of the beans. And so the first breakfast then that didn't have any salt in it was one that I had told him, give him this, and I just told him, give him oat groats, and I don't remember what it was anymore. But anyway, that was first time he had no salt that whole 10 days after a heart attack. And I brought him home, and he was told then that he had this aneurysm and that he'd have to have surgery down the road. 2 days I have him home with meat, no salt, doing fully, Dr. Esselstyn, greens, dark leafy greens, 6 times a day. He has no edema. It's gone, because when he came home, he had to wear those compression socks and everything. The edema was gone. We go back to the doctor, and he tells him he can't find the aneurysm. And that was really cool. I have the tail end of that moment when I had gone to go check on a bill, and when I came back in, they were doing the echocardiogram, and the doctor, his eyes were huge, the tech's eyes were huge, and they were smiles, and they were like, we can't find it. They couldn't find the aneurysm. God had healed this aneurysm on my husband's heart. And so then a week later we went back, and the doctor again says he couldn't see anything, he couldn't find the aneurysm, but he still wanted to watch that spot, because sometimes those aneurysms develop after a heart attack, and the wall, that muscle gets thick, and then it pushes out, and it becomes a problem. So anyway, so that's what's been going on with me. My whole life changed after my husband's heart attack. He came home, and I had to cook for him now 3 meals a day, where he wasn't eating with me, he was eating out. And I refused to make him food that was gonna make him sick. That was where I stood. I said, I'm not gonna be responsible for him having a problem with his heart. And I wish that he would have listened to me earlier, but he's listening to me now, and he's been absolutely perfect, plant-based. He has not complained, not once, not even once. And I know he doesn't like to eat the same things over and over again, but it's kind of funny because, like in more than in one meal or the second meal, he doesn't like leftovers. But yesterday I made some chili for Sloppy Joe's, and he asked for it again in the night. And he asked for it again today, but to put it like on a baked potato, to have stuffed potatoes with that chili. He likes it so much. So I have some new recipes and things that I'll be able to share, because I could eat the same thing over and over and over again, and everybody got frustrated with me on my channel because I ate the same thing all the time. But my husband likes a variety. So right now I think I counted up that there's like 10 different dishes that I can make. And some of them are ones that I made before, but some are new. So I'll be able to share those things with you. He's doing really well, and he's a walking miracle, which is pretty amazing. The other thing was that here in Mexico, we didn't have any medical insurance, and it literally was like watching It's a Wonderful Life, but for my husband, Mr. Neighbor, because people that we hadn't even heard from for maybe practically 15 years or more, they were able to give offerings to help, and all of my husband's medical bills were paid for in full because of people that loved my husband so much, and they gave and helped us through this time, and we're so grateful. It was all just God's hand. And it's like the tapestry, you heard the example of a beautiful tapestry, but you turn it around and it's just a big mess on the other side. It's just amazing who God can use. And so we're so grateful, and thank you. If you're watching this and you were one that gave and you were one that prayed for us during that really, really difficult time, thank you so much. There were many nights I couldn't have made it without God. I was, like I said earlier, I was, on my prayer pillow, on my knees, or I'd fall on the floor in my knees in the bathroom, or I'd find myself in my car praying and crying out to God. And there was one night in particular that everybody was asleep in the house, and I just had serious concerns about my husband's health. And it was probably 10 o'clock at night at least, and the cardiologist called. I had just said, God, you told me you wouldn't give me more than I can bear. And the phone rang. It was a cardiologist telling me, your husband's fine. He's fine. And then another friend who is a nurse sent me a text message explaining to me why he would be fine. And so I just am so grateful for God's mercy and his kindness. And if you ever go through a tragedy, you don't want to go through it without the Lord, through a crisis. We need him. We need his strength. He's the one that's going to be our anchor. He's going to come and rescue us. But we have to cry out to him. We have to be willing to humble ourselves and say, God, I need you. Come and rescue me. I can't do this by myself. And not only in those times when it's difficult, but to give him your life and praise him when things are good too. And it's all for his glory. And that's what my husband said when he had this heart attack, and he was told he might not make it, and he said, God, whatever you want. And there was a point, the second time, he had to go back, and they told him about the oxygen, and he told me that he told the Lord that he didn't want to be a burden on anyone, and he didn't want to live on oxygen, that he just take him home then, took him home to heaven. And he said the Lord told him, well, now that you're done with your life, let me use it and do what I want with it. So he's still here today, and that's God's miraculous healing hand. He's a mighty God. And I thank you for watching and listening to my story and letting me do this live so that I don't have to go back and edit it again. Thank you to those that have tuned in, and God bless you. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Have a great day.